Hello, Mr. Randy again. This is part 2 of our final project videos here. And now we want to take all of the drawings that we've created, the axle, the wheel, and the fork, and we want to bring them together into an assembly drawing that's going to show this thing all put together. So what we're going to do, first of all, is I'm going to start a new part file for the assembly drawing. And I'm going to use the inch plotter template because this is going to be a C-size printout when we get done with it. And we'll hit that. So here's our drawing space, and I'm going to zoom out quite a bit for our assembly drawing. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up my drawings of the axle and the wheel and the fork. So we're going to go to Open, and I'm going to grab the axle, the wheel, and the fork, and I'm going to open them all at once. And in they come. And so a couple things. I'm going to take, in this drawing right now, I'm going to turn off the dimension layer. We're not going to need those. Now, I'd like to see all of the drawings on the screen at one time. So we're going to go to View, and I'm going to hit Tile horizontally. You can also hit Tile vertically. They'll do the same thing in this situation. So this is going to give me all the drawings, and I have the wrong drawing there, so I'm going to close that. And let's open the fork. I grabbed the wrong drawing there. There's the fork. Again, we'll tile, and now we should have everything in its right place. I'm going to click in this drawing, and I'm going to turn off dimensions. That's just the little light bulb for the dimension layer. I'll click in this drawing. It already has dimensions turned off. I'll click in the fork drawing. We'll turn off dimensions like so. All right, now for the video, we're in a pretty squeezed space here. You'll have more room on your desktop in terms of height here. But nonetheless, I'm going to get each of these drawings kind of lined up. And I want to be able to see all my views here in each viewport. So you just click in each viewport, and then you can adjust. All right. So I have my wheel here, I have my fork here, my axle here. All right. I'm going to begin with the fork, and I'm going to grab these two views. If you're in Mr. Andy's 101, I've asked you to do a top view also, but we're just going to bring these two views in. And we'll right-click and drag. Okay, this is a right-click and drag. Drop them here and say Copy. I'll come into this viewport and I'll window the wheel. Again, I'll push the right mouse button down and drag the wheel into this view. I'll put that right underneath. Copy. And then finally, we'll grab the axle geometry, right-click and drag, and drop that in this view. All right, we're done with these drawings now. I'm going to close each one and tell it, no, don't save the changes. You don't want to mess up your drawings. No, and we'll close this one, and we'll say no. And now let's maximize our assembly drawing. This will give us a little more room here. All right, so we got to put all these parts together. First thing, we're going to do a little cleanup on this fork here. We don't show hidden lines in assembly drawings typically, so we're going to take all that out. We're going to take out that section. We're going to take all that information out, and that fillet, and that line, and that little fillet there, and I missed that center mark. I'm going to zoom up and reattach. We'll leave the center mark in there. That'll be all right. Then in the fork drawing, again, I'm going to take out some hidden line geometry up here. We'll just delete that. We're going to leave this down here for a minute. We'll show you why in just a second. All right. I'm going to move the wheel first, so I'm just going to grab the whole wheel. And we're going to click on the Move command. You can also type in M. I'm going to grab the center of that circle, and I'm going to bring it up here and drop it on the center of that circle. It's going to line everything up. And I guess while I'm here, I'll do some cleanup. So I can delete these circles. I've got a couple circles here I can delete because ultimately the axle, the head of the axle is going to show here. This circle can come out. And I guess I'll go ahead and trim. We'll pick these as our cutting planes, and then I'll take out these. I'm even going to take out the center circle there. Check with Mr. Mann, see if he wants it like that or if he'd like you to keep that solid. And then in this view, I'm going to take the section A and the arrowhead and the line, and I'm going to move them straight up above the view here. And then we'll drag this up because we're going to show the assembly in section also, so we might as well take advantage of that work. And in fact, I didn't grab it, but it would have been nice to have bring in the section label down here that I had with the wheel, because then I could have just put it underneath this view. All right, so this view is looking better. I want to bring together the side view now, the section view. The first thing we have to deal with here, if I did a dimension here real quick, from here to here, that's 2.063. However, if I dimension the width of the wheel, it's only 2 inches. So there's some clearance in there. We'd like the wheel to be centered in this space. So you're going to have to subtract these two numbers and divide by 2. I'll let you figure that out. I'm going to offset and offset this line in. That's the half distance. And now I'm going to move the wheel here. So I'm going to grab all that. M for move. My base point is going to be the intersection right here between the center line and the edge of the wheel. And I'm going to drop it on that intersection right there. Now I'm immediately going to delete that line. I don't want to accidentally leave that in. And this should look very centered now. I should see an even gap on both sides. Next up, let's deal with the axle now. So let's grab the head of the axle, and we're going to move that from the center, and we're going to drop it right here in the middle. Zoom up on that. We'll get that hidden line out of there. Be careful if your duplicate center lines clog things up, pull those out. Make sure that you've got an open space here. You've got gaps and all that as you would on any drawing. I've got a center line in here that I can delete, or 2. So make sure you clean up. All right, now we're ready to put the axle in the section view. So I'm going to grab it and I'm going to move it. I'm going to take the intersection on the underside of the head, right there, and I'm going to attach it right here. That's where that axle goes. I've got lots of center lines here to deal with, so let's see if we can snip out one of them. Let's just pull a few of these out. We'll just leave one in there. We can stretch that out now. Whoop. Let's try that again. We'll stretch that straight out, like so. Now, notice the hole, the hidden lines for the hole in the fork are bigger than the axle. That makes sense. That way the axle can be put through there without press fitting it. But we don't want to show that, so we're going to delete these on both sides. Then if we zoom way up, notice that, again, the hole in the wheel is bigger than the shaft. I'm once again going to delete that extra line, because if we left it in there, you can see it just looks like one fat line, and when we printed it, it would show that way, which is incorrect. So we don't want to see a big fat line there. So we're going to delete those lines. Now, one nice thing is, with the new version of SolidWorks, we can actually fix the hatch pattern instead of just deleting it. So I can click on the hatch pattern and get that grip point and pull it down to that new intersection. So we'll do that on both sides. And then pull this grip point up. And we'll slide over and pull that up and repair that hatch pattern. It's probably quicker than putting it back in again. Now, when we do assembly drawings in section like this, any shafts, axles, fasteners, etc., we don't section them. Even though the cutting plane goes through them, we don't show them in section. We draw them as if they're solid. The assembly actually would look very funny if we section the axle shaft. Looks much more realistic if we leave it solid. So if this axle shaft is solid, then all these lines that are crossing it, most of them have to come out. So we're going to do a trim here. I'm going to pick the edges of the axle, and we're going to take out, oops, wrong button. We're going to take out those lines. Okay. We'll do more work on this end right now. If you remember, in the drawing that you were given, there was a note that pointed to the end of the axle shaft, and it said rivet over an assembly. Well, we'd like to show it as if it were riveted or hammered over so that it couldn't be pulled out. So we want to put an arc in here to show that rivet. So let's do that next. I'm going to zoom up a bit on that. And we're going to do a 3-point arc. So it's the top one on the list, 3-point arc. And I'm going to say nearest, and I'm just going to eyeball a location in here, a little more than halfway up. Then I'll say nearest, and again, I want to go, oh, maybe halfway or just a little more here. And then finally, nearest one last time. And again, I'm just going to eyeball. I'd like to see equal distance on both sides of the shaft there. That's close enough. Now, this line will come out, and then I'll pull these back. And this is just the underside of the head, so we leave that line in. We don't trim that out. Same on this end. So that's how that axle will look. Now, in your assignment, this whole thing is in sections, so you're going to have to put the fork and the gasket, which I haven't shown yet, in section, and you're going to have to decide what that looks like. I'm not going to give you that answer. One thing I do want you to remember is read your handout. The hatch pattern for the fork goes in a different direction, and the hatch pattern for the gasket, again, is in a different direction and maybe even a different spacing or different pattern type because it's rubber or neoprene. So read your handout to get the proper patterns and angles when you hatch these other parts. Don't have all the hatch patterns go in the same direction. It'll all look like one part. It'll confuse the reader of the drawing. So let's get our gasket in here. We're going to offset 0.1. That was the thickness of the gasket. And then we'll clean that up. So let's pull these up. So it looks like that gasket's sitting on top. Oh, Mr. Randy. Offset 0.1. There we go. Now, there are two other things we need to do to the assembly, really three. We need to put some overall dimensions on. We need to call out some parts with balloon leaders. And I need a note to call out that rivet on that shaft. That note goes in the assembly, not in the detail drawing of the axle. If you put it in the detail of the axle, take it out of there, delete it. All right, so let's get some overall dimensions in here. I'm going to switch to the dimension layer. I'm going to do a linear dimension, and I'm going to get the overall height of the part here, the assembly, as a dimension here. I'm going to place it about ½ inch out. Now, if you have a dimension in a drawing that looks like this, that means when the person builds this assembly, they have to measure it and make sure it's 5.35 plus or minus whatever the tolerance is. Well, we don't want them to do that. The variances in the various dimensions in here could cause this dimension to vary a fair amount. We just want them to know that it's about this big, so when they're designing packaging or boxes for the part, if a client or customer that might be buying this needs to know roughly how big it is, we want them to have a dimension, but we don't want it to be a dimension they check. So we put it in parentheses. That means it's a reference dimension, but it's not a dimension they would have to verify or check. So to do that, we put it in parentheses. So we're going to double click that text. And we're going to arrow key to the left and put a parenthesis there. Arrow key to the right, put a parenthesis there, and then just click out. That's how a reference dimension should look. We want to dimension the overall length of the assembly. So again, we'll do a dimension from corner to corner. We'll pop it up here above that letter A. Once again, we'll double click and parenthesis and click out. And then you can put in a dimension for the overall width of the part. Be careful because the head sticks out a little bit. So the overall width is actually going to come from this corner up to this corner to get that overall depth, I should say, of the part. But I'll let you put that in. We're going to put some balloon leaders in now. We need to call out each of the parts in the assembly. So I'm going to go to the Annotate tab, and we're going to do a balloon leader. So we'll click on multi-leader now, so make sure you choose balloon here, multi-leader. I'm going to click a near point, and I think I'll call the gasket out first. I'm going to just click on a point up there and get that balloon up a bit. We want some angle to that line. Click it in, and the gasket is part number 3, I believe. Double check that in your handout. And then I'm going to call out the fork. So again, we'll do a multi-leader. I think I'll grab a near point right here on the edge of the fork, and we'll drop that in here somewhere. And we'll call out that as part number 4. We need to call out the wheel. So multi-leader, near point on the wheel. We'll bring that out here. That'll be part number 2. And then the axle, nearest. Again, I'll click right on the edge of the head there and bring that down here, and we'll make that part number 1. Again, verify these numbers in your handout. Okay, I'm just going from memory here. Now, we need to make these all line up. So I'm just going to click up here, drag a crossing box to grab them all. We're going to click on Align. I'll pick one to align them all to, and then you want to make sure that you stay vertical. Watch what happens if I go at an angle. Yeah, that's not quite what we want. So make sure you do a vertical line right there and click, and that gets them all aligned vertically. Okay. Finally, we need that node over here to tell them to rivet this over. So we'll zoom up on this end. I'm going to do now a standard multi-leader that won't put the balloon on there. I'll click on that. We'll again go to a near point. We'll bring it down, and then I'm going to type in here rivet over in assembly, ASSY, and we'll just click out. So this is what our 2 assembly views should look like, again with the exception of figuring out what the section is going to look like for the fork and the gasket. Okay, and I'll leave that up to you. You'd bring in a title block and border. Again, Mr. Randy's students should build a top view up here. You're going to have to copy the head and the wheel up here, turn them 90 degrees so you can figure out how they'll show up in the fork. If you were in lecture, I demonstrated that for you today, so you should have a glimpse of what it will look like. But nonetheless, there you have the final assembly. Bring in your C-size sheet. This will get plotted to the big plotter. Good luck and enjoy.